So welcome back. So in the last video we set up our project, we implemented the basic project structure. Now in this video I want to start outputting, or I want to start working on the product page, outputting our, for now, dummy products, which we can add to the cart and, well, buy later on in this tutorial. So let's start. For this, I already got my index.blade.php file here, which is of course the page or the view which should hold my different products. However, I also want to have a header to, well, later on navigate to my, let's say, user area to sign in or sign up, and also to access my card. So I will create that header for now, and I do this in the partials folder by adding a new file, which I will call header.blade.php. And then on getbootstrap.com, under components, I will pick the default bootstrap navbar. Now, of course, you may change this or replace this with whatever navbar you like, but I just want to have a basic navigation bar here, which I can use and customize to my needs. So therefore, I will grab all of that code here, which is more than I will need, but I will clean it up in a second, and paste that into my header here. Now, as I already said, this is way more code than I need. So I will quickly clean this up. But before I actually do this, I want to implement it first. So in the master file, in the master layout here, right before I enter my content here, I want to include this partial, and I do this by using the include command here in Laravel's Blade templating engine. And then I just specify the name or the path to the file I want to include. So this is in the partials folder, and then the header file. So if I save this and reload my page, you can now see this bootstrap header. With that, it's time to clean it up. So let's think about what do I need or what do I want. I want this brand here, which leads back to the product index page in this case. For now, I don't want all of this stuff here. I want to have a link on the right, which allows me to go to the user page or to log in, log out, sign in, or something like this, the whole user related stuff. Or now that I think about it, let's make this a drop down where I then have like sign up, sign in, or if you're signed in, log out and access to the user page. So drop down is fine. And I will also want to keep this link here, which should lead to the shopping cart. So now first I'll get rid of this part here on the left. And in order to do this, you can just see I want to get rid of this link and the drop down. So I may just grab all these links or this whole unordered list here on the left, delete it. Also get rid of the search bar, delete that. Now on the right, as I said, I will keep this link, which should be leading to the shopping cart later on. And I also want to keep this drop down menu, but I will use or call this user account or something like this. This is fine. And in here, well, I will get rid of some of these actions here. Let's say these two actions, and later on then I will have, let's say, the logout link at the bottom, and here the user account link or something like this. So if I now go back, let's have a look. This looks much better. And if I resize this page a bit, you can see that we get this mobile navigation built into Bootstrap, so this works too. Great, so that's the important first step. Next, I want to add a little bit of fine-tuning already. I want to have like a user account icon here next to the text and a shopping cart icon next to the shopping cart link here. I will use Font Awesome to do this. And if you're not aware what Font Awesome is, this is, well, what the name says, a font which you can include like any other font you might use in your web page. But instead of real characters, this font has a couple of images or little icons you can use. And therefore this font makes it really easy to implement icons, small little handy icons in your application. Now in order to use it, you may just click Get Started and then just pick this CDN link here to import it, well, from a CDN so that you don't have to download it. And I will also include that right below the Bootstrap import here. And the cool thing now is I can have a look at the icons. If I click on all icons, And now I can just search. So if I search for user, I see all the icons related to a user. And let's say this default user icon doesn't look too bad. Now, as you see, if you click on it, you already get the code you need to have to add this icon to your page. So if I now go back to my header and add this user icon right before this user account text here, if I now reload my page, you can see this little icon. Now, obviously, this is way too close to this user account text. So, well, that's only the case because I have to enter a space here. And if I reload, looks much better. Now, let's also have a look if we can find a great shopping cart here. So I'll search for shopping and we get this cart plus or this default shopping cart. I think I'll go with this. So just grab this code here and add this in front of the shopping cart text. This time I'll think about adding a space after it. So now if I reload, it already looks a lot better, even though it's still the default Bootstrap log and you might fine tune it, but I think it's good to go with that. So with the header in place, let's actually work on the product page itself. And I think of having a grid of several products here, a responsive grid, of course, where we will have on each product a short description, a title, an image, and then a link which allows us to buy it or to add it to the cart. And of course, also a price would be good. So again, I will use Bootstrap's built-in styles or things, helpers I got to get this going. And I will go to the CSS part because I will use the Bootstrap grid here to, well, create my grid basically. And if you're not aware how Bootstrap works, it's definitely worth checking out a detailed tutorial. But to give you a quick start with it, basically to use the grid, which allows you to, well, make your whole page a grid where you can position things, you have a container wrapping the overall grid. And in this container, you have several rows. And in each row, you might have several columns. And Bootstrap is clever enough to provide you different column classes with which you can specify if a column or if columns should stack on certain screen sizes. And you will find all this information on this grid information page on the Bootstrap page here. So what I will do is I will go back to my application and first in my layout in the master.blade.php file, I will wrap the overall content in a container. So in a div having a class of container. And again, if you're wondering what I'm doing here by just typing and then having this whole div tag with the class attached to it, that is a plugin called Emmet. And it's not only available for PHP Storm, it's also available for other editors. So you might check this out if you're interested in having this functionality in your editor. And it basically allows me to like specify a class name by typing dot and then the name of the class, and then just hitting tab to create a div with that class. And in the same style, I could create a h1 tag by typing h1 and then hitting tab. But that's just a side note. So back to the grid. The content is wrapped in this container. And I do this, of course, because each content will have a grid in my application here at least. And therefore, each content will be wrapped in this container. However, regarding rows and columns, that is something which will be specified on the individual view, because that of course depends on the way I want to structure or I want to position data in my view. So I will go back to this index page in the shop folder. And now here, instead of having it works, it's time to structure the layout of this page. Now later on, we might have like, let's say a top information section here or a banner or whatever. But for now, I will only output a couple of thumbnails on this page. Now, speaking of thumbnails, Bootstrap helps with thumbnails too. Under components, you can have a look at the right navigation, and there you will have this point thumbnails. If you click on that, you see how you can include either pure image thumbnails or here thumbnails with image and text and buttons. And this is exactly what I want to have in my application. Therefore, again, I will just copy that code, and if code copying is too boring for you or too beginner-like, you may of course also type it, but it's just a couple of nested divs with separate or with different Bootstrap classes. So back in the index page, I will now enter the thumbnail. So I got my thumbnail in place here. Let's have a look at this. How does it look? Okay, not too bad. I personally want to have it a bit less wide, a bit smaller. Of course, having an image would be great because that looks a bit ugly like this. And I won't need two buttons. I only want to have, let's say, an add to cart button. And then on the left, I want to have my price. So the button should go to the right and say add my cart. And on the left, I want, as I just said, I want to show the price of this item. Okay, so let me work on this. First, I will get rid of this first button, which I won't need. And I'll just restructure it a little bit nicer here, replace this with a div element here. I don't want this to be a paragraph. Here in this paragraph above the icons, or above the buttons, excuse me, I will have the info text about the item, and I will just enter some dummy lorem ipsum for now. And again, this text was created by using the Emmet plugin, which has this functionality built in. If you're ever in need of some dummy text, well, to be honest, the quickest way is just to Google for lorem ipsum. And for example, you might find this page, which is on German, but it's straightforward. You just specify the number of words you want. Then you could choose if you want words, which is the default, or characters, or paragraphs. Then you just hit go and boom, there you go. You get your text, which you can copy. So I got my lorem ipsum text here. This will be the title, which should be the product title. And of course, here we need an image. Now let's have a look for a possible image. I will just search for, well, what do we want to sell on this page? Let's say we're selling books. So we're selling Harry Potter because that is the book we like here, or maybe you don't, you may choose another book. So let me have a look at, well, these are the German books, so you might not recall these layouts or these images. So you may just pick whichever book you want. So I will go with that. Great. And I will just copy the link here. Now you on your page shouldn't do deep linking like this. You want to store the image on your own server and serve it from that. And I will implement this functionality later. I just want to get a quick prototype going here. So I will enter this link here in the source attribute of this image, and I want to reload my page. Looks good, but obviously far too big. I don't want that to be in the original size, I certainly don't. So in order to fix the size of this, I will just add some inline styles for now. I will set the maximum height to, let's say, 150 pixels. And I will also give this a class of image responsive just to make this look good on all device sizes. So now if I resize this, yeah, looks better. And of course, style this to your needs. I am happy with this. Now, inline styling is not the best way. Just wanted to see how this looks. So I'll get rid of this here. And instead I will add a new folder in this public folder, which is the folder, of course, the server will serve in the end. And so the browser has access to this folder. And here I will add a new folder called source. And in the source folder, I will have another new folder called CSS, which should hold my app.css file. So all the styling for my application will go in here. Now, you can see that the image I want to style lives inside this thumbnail class. And therefore, I can use this thumbnail class here and then access each image in this class, which is only the one I want to change, and set the maximum height to, well, 150 pixels like before. Now, if I go back and reload, you will see that this does not work. And that's the case because I'm having my style sheet here, but I'm not importing it anywhere, right? So back in the master layout here, I want to add the import to my own style sheet. And I will do this right below the Bootstrap files here, where I have my styles hook. So I could either import it here in this master layout, or now import it in my index, in my shop index file, and use the styles hook here with section styles to then provide the styles I want to use on this view. Now, since I want to use this app.css file throughout my whole application, I will go with the first approach and add the import directly in the master layout here. So right below Bootstrap, I will add a new link or new import. And now how do I import my app.css file in Laravel? You have to be careful here because your files will always be served from the public folder, because this is the folder accessible by the browser. However, depending on the route you're currently on, you might not be able to access the source folder like this, source css app.css. This will work now because if I can reload, this applies the new styling. But if I would have another route, like let's say later on the shopping cart, then the browser would look for a source /css /app.css file under this shopping cart folder, which of course doesn't exist on the server since this is only an URL segment and not a folder on the server. But the browser doesn't know that this is just the way we style our URL, and therefore this would lead to an error. Now, in order to always import this file from the same source or from the same path and not be dependent on a current URL, we can use a helper Laravel offers us here. And I access this helper by using double curly braces, which allows us to add code to our Laravel Blade template. And the code I want to enter here is URL : 2, and then the path to this file seen from this public folder on. So source css app.css. Now this URL to thing here, this to method used on some kind of URL class here, is in reality a facade. URL is a facade. Now facades is a concept in Laravel which allows to easily access different helpers, if you want to put it that way, of the framework. Now this to method here in reality is defined in some other class or in some other object. But so that we don't have to write or access this complete object and find out where this to method actually lives, Laravel offers us this URL facade, which does what the name implies. It's a facade. It allows us to easily access this underlying helper method here. And this specific helper method, to, does the following. It takes the path we specify here as an argument and finds this path in your root folder, independent of the current route. And then it will parse this in the correct URL the browser has to access to fetch this file. So by doing it this way here, we're making sure that we're always fetching this file and not trying to access some path which doesn't exist. So now if I reload the page, you won't see any changes because of course it still works, but now it will work on all routes and not just the root route we're currently on. So to finish this thumbnail, I want to move this button to the right and say add to cart. And I also want to output a price on the left where the button currently sits at. In order to do this, I will go back to my index file in the shop folder. And to move the button to the right, I will give this another class here, which is called pull right. This is a built-in helper class in Bootstrap, which applies some floating to this button to float it on the right. If I now reload, this looks pretty broken because this button now hangs on the bottom right corner here, and well, this might be the style you like, but I think we can do better here. So in order to fix this, I have to clear fix before using this float here. So I will apply another class to the div holding this button, and I will give this div a class of clear fix. And if I now reload, this looks much better. Now what does clear fix do? Clear fix is basically a combination of styles being applied, which makes sure that all prior floats are cleared before the new one is applied. And by doing this, we make sure that this float, this button here floating somewhere, actually floats in the overall element it sits in, instead of being kind of mixed up with prior floats, and the whole grid here in Bootstrap is built with floats, and therefore hanging a little bit off on the page. It's really a stylistic fix we have to apply here, and a common one too, as long as you use floats to lay out your page at least. And of course there are other great ways like Flexbox in the future, but not supported by all browsers, so I will go with the default Bootstrap grid system based on floats for now. So floats, okay, that's one thing. Now add or change the text and add the price on the left here. So in order to change the text, that is straightforward. Add to cart. And also I want to change the color of this button. Now if you go over to Bootstrap, you can see which colors we got available. You do find this here under CSS and then buttons. And if you scroll down a little bit, you see all the default buttons Bootstrap offers. Now I think a green button is a great choice, as it should encourage our customers to buy something. So in order to make a button green, you have to apply the button success class to it. And note that you can not only style button elements with this button classes, but like we're currently doing in our app, also style anchor tags or any element as a button. Now this button already has the button class, but we have to change button default to button success here. So if I now reload, you can see I got the add to cart button. Last step, I want to add the price, so I will add a new div here where I will say, like, let's say $12 as a price. And now if I reload, this looks pretty crappy. So in order to bring this in line, I will also add a class here, the pull left class, to float this on the left, but in the same line as this button floats. And this looks better, but we could make this stand out a little bit more. So in order to make this stand out a little bit more, I will give this a new class, price. This is not a Bootstrap class. I will define this myself in the app.css file. And I want to style this a little bit. And basically what I want to do is I want to make it bold. I also want to increase the font size a little bit, at least, I think. So let's say 16 pixels. Let's try this. And yeah, how does this look? Looks better. Might stand out even a bit more if this text here were a bit more grayish and less black. So in order to do this, I will go back to the index page and I want to style this paragraph of the product description. Therefore, I will give this a new class called description. And back in the app.css file, I will make sure that my thumbnail class, I want to style all descriptions, because of course this description lives inside this thumbnail element or this thumbnail div. And description should have a color of, well, let me just choose a nice gray here, like this maybe. Save this, have a look. Could be a little bit more on the white side, so maybe like this. Yeah, I think that's great. So with this, I'm pretty happy, and of course there's always something we can do, but I will leave it like this. I think I'm even happy with the size now that I think of it. We should be able to fit 3 of them on one page. And now before actually outputting some data or making the next steps, let me duplicate that 5 times to see how this looks if we have a really complete grid here and not just one item. So in order to do this, for now, of course, later on we will just do this more elegant. I will grab my whole column here, not the row, just a column for now, and copy it 2 times. And regarding the width, you see these classes here, call MD4 and call SM6. Now what these classes do is they specify how many blocks this div should be wide. Now in a Bootstrap grid, there are always 12 blocks available. So with having MD4, this means on a medium-sized screen, each div here should be 4 blocks wide, so 3 divs are fit on one or in one row with gutters between them. However, on smaller screens, only 2 of them fit, as each of the divs should be 6 blocks wide, indicated by this class. So now that I copied that, if I reload, you see this looks okay in my opinion. And now to have multiple rows, I will go up to the top and grab the whole row here with all the columns in between and duplicate that. And now if I reload, you see we get this grid with all the items. And now again, you may restyle this, make this smaller, wider, whatever you like. I'll go with that. And I think this is a decent first prototype of a shop. And in the next video, we'll go the next steps.